final stage of our sessions. And I think it's clear to everybody, as we navigate complexities of sustainable logistics, we need to look at sustainability and digitalization as forces that come together. So to decode the future, we are joined by Sörman-Nilsson, a futurist and the founder of ThinkU. So his work with global giants like Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, as well as his data-driven research and thought leadership, I think makes him a perfect candidate to guide us through this discussion. Anders is an award-winning keynote speaker, author of 3 books on digital transformation, and his insights have been published in Wall Street Journal, Financial Review, and much more. And by the way, we will open session for a Q&A after Anders' keynote, so you can scan now new QR code to post your questions on Slido, and we'll have some mics in the audience as well. So, are we ready to get a glimpse into the future? Anders, please join us on stage. Checking your clicker is there. Well, first, before you get, I'll keep it for now. So, futurist, you can look into the future. Who's going to win Fast Forward Challenge?
Well, us futurists, we don't predict the future necessarily, but we do help people prepare for it. I must say, I actually really enjoyed all 3 pitches. I think they're fantastic. Both the idea of, jugaad innovation or the tuk-tuk and taking that global, I think is fantastic. Great idea of frugal innovation. My tires blew the other day on my EV. I had to import new ones from Germany, so I'm looking forward to deploying your solution as well. And, Australia even participates in the Eurovision these days. So Australia always, punches above its weight. So I love that solution as well. So I think it's fantastic. I'm going to be like Paul the octopus. Do you remember him from the 2010 Soccer World Cup who got all his bets right? Does anyone remember? Yeah, 10 out of 10. So who knows? I've got a few favorites, but I'll leave that to be unsaid.
All right. So hope you're better than the octopus and look into the future. And the stage is yours.
Thank you. Cool. G'day. G'day. Does everyone understand my slightly weird Swedish-Australian accent, first of all? Yeah? Cool. For the introverts, just nod. Okay, for the extroverts, please don't hold back for the remainder. Just checking that there's slightly weird analog signals connecting with some of the more analog and some of the more digital radio antenna here in the room. Okay, fantastic. Well, as a futurist, ladies and gentlemen, which basically means my mum has absolutely no idea what I do for a living. She calls me her son, the one who used to be a lawyer, who's now a glorified astrologer. It's no one like your family to tell you what you truly do for a living. But as a futurist, dare I say, I'm also a little bit of a traditionalist and maybe a little bit of a humanist and certainly a naturalist as well. And I do believe that even in a future that's increasingly powered by technology, there is still very much room for human ingenuity, human creativity, and of course, human innovation. And this leads us to thinking about the existential crisis that we find ourselves in here today. Do people have these sort of dual feelings at the moment of being super excited about what the startups and some of the scale-ups and some of the incumbents are doing at the moment? Or is it just me? Okay, no, there's some feelings out there as well. Okay. Who also has some little bit of existential dread? Because that's okay at the same time, right? There's this sense of duality happening at the moment. I want to cast our minds back for a moment before we talk about the future and we decode the future, back to the late 1960s. In the railway cars industry in the United States at the time, at any one point in time, only 5% of all railway cars were on the move. This sucks, right, is the technical term. Right? 95% stood idle, and it's not because they were lazy or that they were trade union represented and had to rest. It's that the railway cars owners had no idea where those railway cars actually were. This is 12 years before I was born. We've come a long way since then. The owners of those cars knew that if they were able to increase the utilization rate from 5 to 10%, they would need only half as many railway cars. Would this be good for people, planet, and profits? Absolutely. Today, because of telematics, RFID technologies, and other technologies we've heard about here for the last 2 days, we know where all of our physical assets are all of the time, from farm to table, from producer to consumer. This is amazing, right, in terms of providing digital provenance and story throughout the entire supply chain. Let's fast forward to more recent history. Who remembers this movie, Ex Machina? It's a movie about artificial intelligence gone haywire, and the plot line of this movie is about the Turing test. Who knows what the Turing test is? It's a blind test, an imitation game where a human is exposed to, well, they don't know if it's a robot or a human, and the sophistication of the AI is such that it can fool a human into thinking that it's interacting with a human as opposed to a robot. Does this sound eerily familiar to stuff that we're experiencing right this minute? When the directors and producers, the marketing team about this movie, thought about how do we launch this movie in the most logical fashion, because it's a bit of a science fiction becoming science fact kind of plot line, they thought, why don't we launch it at the coolest conference in town? At the DHL Era of Sustainable Logistics conference on the conference app. We're monitoring all of you. No, they launched it at the South by Southwest conference, which is the second coolest conference in town. And they did it on the most logical digital platform available at the time, on Tinder. Because they knew a large portion of the conference audience would be geostrategically updating their passports to South by Southwest and seeing if they could go on a hot date later on that evening. The producers, the directors behind this movie thought, why don't we build, unbeknownst to the lovesick puppies, a humanoid profile based upon Ava, the Swedish actress Alicia Vikander, and because she's female and also artificially intelligent, she was able to have a multitude of conversations with the lovesick puppies at the same time, unbeknownst to them. At the end of that great dialogue, there was a little call to action like any good marketing ploy, which said, if you want to see more pretty pictures of me, please go and see my Instagram account. What do you think awaited them on the Instagram account? Little message saying, you've been hacked. I'm not sure why I'm picking on you, Carsten. All right. This is now where we are at. AI now speaks human. By 2025, in January next year, the forecast from Joe Biden's cyber security advisor, Nina D. Schick, 90% of all content generated online will have been synthetically, not biologically or organically created by human beings. This Gen AI also holds massive potential for all of us in logistics, the way we run our networks, from eco-routing, from heat mapping, from providing extreme clarity through the supply chain about where deforestation might be happening in your supply chain so that you can meet the new EU regulations. The question to all of you, in an era where AI now speaks human, it used to be that you had to be a coder or in tech or a software engineer. Today, if you have a voice, if you can speak, if you can type, the interface is now human. The question to all of you, having taken away all the knowledge from these 2 days, is what human impact or sustainable innovation will you now start coding for, courtesy of new technologies? Roy Amara, a scientist and a great futurist forebear of mine, came up with this little saying, that we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short term, but we tend to underestimate it in the long term. As humans, we think in a very linear fashion about new technologies. But of course, technologies don't move in a linear fashion. They move in an exponential, or at least sigmoid curve fashion. And yes, it's true that we hype new technologies like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, autonomous vehicles. Sometimes it's hard to get to them because of supply chain crunches, right? Then we focus on the next thing and we forget about the longer-term impact on GPS navigation, telemedicine, and internet and e-commerce, which has fundamentally changed society over the last 20 or 30 years. But I would challenge Roy Amara here, and I would say that this chart may no longer hold true because AI is moving so quickly today that we mustn't underestimate it in the short term or long term. And certainly, in terms of its applicability to sustainable logistics, it will play a massive role. But with AI comes a lot of responsibility. And that's where human ingenuity and great human values and ethics and sustainable thinking comes into it. A few years ago, Apple launched its super cool fintechy credit card, the Apple Card. And they thought, let's do away with traditional FICO scoring and we'll just use the AI to do all our credit ratings for us. In a big ceremony, they gave one card to Steve Wozniak and one to his wife. Now, by the way, they share all their financial credentials equally. So one to the founder of Apple, one to his wife. Magically, based on the AI, his credit limit was 10 times her credit limit. Why do you think this was? Yes, that's right, because the data was shit. That's a technical term, excuse my French, as we say in Australia. The data was backward-looking and it was sexist. What do you think happened to the launch in a very unsustainable fashion when Steve Wozniak and his wife took to Twitter, now X, to complain about the sexism of the AI? This was a massive product launch failure because it was not sustainable, certainly from a governance perspective, not appropriate at all. We have to retain our fundamental humanity, ethics, and responsibilities, even when we think about sustainable supply chains. Who gets products faster? Are there certain areas that overrepresent when it comes to charging stations, for example? Are they likely to be in warmer areas, more sunny areas, more prosperous areas? These are all things we have to think about when we think about the deployment of technologies so that unlike Apple, we don't have to do a post-mortem, we can start doing pre-mortems. The pre-mortem is a way better thought experiment than a post-mortem. And the pre-mortem I want to invite you in today is to start thinking about the year 2030. And imagine for a moment on your watch, as a CEO, as a leader, your company went belly up at the same time as we saw disastrous environmental impacts. What were the trends that you just missed? What were the future signals that you deliberately chose to ignore? And what were the investment decisions that you just delayed and delayed, kicking the can down the road, as it were, that led to that demise? And instead, as a result of spending 2 days here at the era of sustainable logistics, what change will you make today to prevent that from happening? This is already a really good slide to share with your kids if they're not studying enough for their high school certificates. Or if you want to take it on a date night with your partner, you can also do that as well. All right. All the slides are shareable, by the way, by DHL as well. These are my two beautiful sons, Lucian and Aurelian. In Sydney, in Australia, we live in a national park in Sydney. Now, Australia is the most bushfire-prone country in the world. Because of La Nina and weather and climate change-induced events, we've already got a landslide that's impacted our property where the three of us live. Our insurance premiums over the last 3 years have tripled because we also live in a bushfire zone. And by the way, my sons aren't wearing a wig here. They're blessed with their mother's hair. Okay. All right. You can also share photos of them online as well. They just get a non-fungible token kickback on the blockchain as a result as well. No, please don't share photos of my kids. Now, when I think of bushfires and I think about some of the business opportunities that climate change presents, it's great to see opportunistic ideas spurring up, right? I read about this company called Pour Moi, which is a French brand in the beauty industry. And they've seen now that if you apply a particular type of drop when there's a bushfire, you'll still look fantastic, right? And they're really, really sustainable because, of course, they give one to a firefighter at the same time. Now, I think the ethos of that is beautiful, but is it going to fix climate change? We need more holistic, strategic, collaborative solutions to address these problems. Recently, I sat down with Nikki Sparshott, the then CEO of Unilever for Australia and New Zealand, who's transformed Unilever in Australia and New Zealand into becoming a certified B Corp. She is now the head of transformation globally for Unilever, and she said something profound to me in that interview on our podcast, The Second Renaissance, where she said, Anders, just because you're purpose-driven doesn't mean you're profit-deprived. In fact, the experience, as we heard from yesterday, with Paul Polman's tutelage and leadership for many years, the most prosperous brands at Unilever are the most purpose-led ones. You can do good while doing well. Just because you're purpose-led today doesn't mean you're profit-deprived. And of course, all the numbers bear this out as well. Right? Out of 200 academic studies, 90% of them show that sound sustainability standards lead to lower cost of capital for companies. The operational performance, according to 88% of those academic studies, show that the performance is higher. And of course, 80% of those studies also show that share price performance is higher for good sustainability practice. I think of this as jugaad or frugal innovation, a concept I came across when I did my Global Executive MBA at the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. Doing more with less. And today, we can do more with less courtesy of digitization and technology. We can have our planetary cake and eat it too. Is that a really weird analogy? Maybe. Because we have some problems to solve, right? I just want to hone in on a couple of these things. 3 billion trees are processed annually to create 241 million tons of shipping boxes. Less than 14% of the 86 million tons of plastic packaging generated worldwide each year is recycled. We see that there's going to be a 36% increase in delivery vehicles by 2030. When we think about online commerce, 30% of clothing items bought online are returned, and out of those, 20% of those returns end up in landfills as they can never, ever be resold. This sucks. And I'm not pointing my finger here, right? It's just what is. But is there a huge opportunity to change the game when we collaborate in this ecosystem facilitated by DHL? Absolutely. Even if we stop emitting carbon today, we're still screwed. Which is why carbon capture is also so critical. And it's amazing to see some of the old fast-forward winners from the past doing some pretty amazing things. Here's one quick example.
Mobile carbon capture for semi-trucks was thought to be impossible, until now.
Here we go. 2,000 RPM.
That sound you're hearing is mobile carbon capture in action. The device on the back of the semi-truck is removing 80% of the carbon from its exhaust, and that's a huge deal.
Every year, semi-trucks create 339 million metric tons of CO2. That's 5% of the entire US carbon footprint. But we have to keep these trucks running because they're an essential part of our supply chain. It's just this massive problem, and we don't have a good solution to decarbonize these trucks.
We're We're building something that's never existed before, and so we have to push ourselves to show people just how far this could go. We have the chance here to make a massive swing in CO2 emissions from positive to negative.
So it's amazing to see what's already being scaled and happening. And when we take certain mega trends together today, be they new technologies, be they the fact that everything that can be connected is becoming connected, the climate change upside and downside, the fact that there's a rise of a conscious consumer, or even B2B today, there's a new sense of procurement with purpose, as we heard from the likes of the Cisco representative here this morning. This all changes the game in terms of the conversation moving forward. And at the core of all of this sits twin transformation, a term coined by my clients at Accenture. And a great example of twin transformation was alluded to yesterday by Mathilde Lerda from the Kering Group. Now, my boy's mother used to work for the Kering Group, and she alluded to this in one of our conversations. Because of the EP&L that they launched, which is essentially a beautiful and glorified Excel spreadsheet. It's much more advanced than that, Mathilde, by the way. They were able to, in 2017, not only just set a target for a 40% reduction in the EP&L impact, they set a target to do so over 7 years by 2024. But because of the technology, the digital approach of pursuing sustainability and digital transformation hand in hand as a match made in heaven, they were able to hit their 40% reduction target, not in 7 years by 2024, but by 2021. Right? This is an example of where we're pursuing digitization and sustainable innovation at the very same time. Our clients at Telia in Sweden, which is like the Singtel of Scandinavia and the Nordics, when they were recently tasked by the Norwegian government to come up with a better road toll infrastructure, they thought, why do we need to build the physical thing? Right? The towers, the plastic that goes into your front window, etc., when we can just do it digitally. Because we've got the anonymized and maybe even sometimes personalized data from everyone using Apple Maps, Google Maps, and Waze, and why don't we just charge them in the background seamlessly? Is this good for people, planet, and profit? This solves a 1 billion Norwegian krona problem for the Norwegian government every year. We no longer have the associated emissions with building those towers any longer. And for my clients at Fleet Partners, at fleet management company that's listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, who own their novated fleet management and also novated leasing company, they own the registration plates for many vehicles. If they ever have to chase an unpaid road toll fine on behalf of their clients for, say, $3.50, it takes them 16 hours of man or woman or personhood time to chase a fee for $3.50. Is that ridiculous? Right? Technology is helping us take the robot out of the human so we can do less of the menial and the mundane and focus more of our cognitive energies on the meaningful and the humane. Twin transformation also plays out in the space of digital twins as well. Just to take one example of digital twin technologies, we heard from Marcus at Schneider Electric earlier. Well, they employed a digital twin to improve factory operations at their Le Vaudreuil site. That's my French for you today. It uses data to optimize energy management, and they've done so to reduce it by 25%. They've reduced material waste by 15% and minimized CO2 emissions by 25%. The digital twin technologies should also be a part of virtualizing and ensuring that you reduce your emissions as well. This is twin transformation. Ask yourself the question, what physical thing do you no longer need to build? Because the virtual, the digital, the AI is so far superior to the physical, old school technology. And our clients at Jaguar Land Rover, by participating with the best in Formula E, where of course DHL was also one of the founding partners, just by participating and setting their targets in a zero carbon competitive context, just taking the software, the digital learnings, they've increased the range of the I-Pace by 20 kilometers just by playing with the best on the Formula E track. Right? 20 kilometers might not sound that much, right? But you know from a last mile delivery perspective that this can matter in cities, right? These goals that the UN has set is shifting the dialogue. I think of the UN SDGs as a creativity catalyst, and human creativity always happens within constraints. Like the Australian company who gives a crap. Excuse my French again. They're a recycled toilet paper brand, and during the pandemic, not recycled in that way, by the way, during the pandemic, they tuned into their life purpose, their ikigai, their vision, clean water and sanitation. They give away 50% of all of their profits to building toilets and also sanitation projects in the developing world. They were one of Australia's largest corporate philanthropists, giving away $5.85 million of profits as a startup. This is pretty impressive when we all stockpiled on recycled toilet paper. Their entire business model, of course, also incredibly sustainable. The UN SDGs is also now shifting the legal dialogue. We're now seeing that salmon, not human beings, but salmon have logistical rights, legal rights. In the city of Seattle recently, the indigenous population managed to provide a safe passageway around hydroelectric dams in Seattle so that the salmon now have a right of passage, a right of way. Isn't this amazing from a logistical perspective, right? Just imagine all those little salmon swimming along, and they're not robot salmons quite yet. All right. This is shifting the dialogue away from a linear economy of take, make, and waste into a circular economy where my tennis shoes are now made up out of recycled fishing materials, fishing net materials, right? Where we're focusing on reducing, reusing, repurposing, remanufacturing, and recycling, as we've heard from a number of the pitches. An Australian company called Zero Co provide plant-based cleaning products in recycled plastic containers saved from the oceans. These are plant-based cleaning products from your home, and they actually work. All right? They give you your Forever bottle. The Forever bottles are made from ocean, beach, and landfill waste. Then you get refill pouches made from recycled plastics and a postage-paid return mailer envelope. It's essentially the old school milkman or milkwoman business model, just digitized for a new age in a closed-loop system. And you can see some of their accomplishments of what they've already done. 70,000 Aussie families are now using their products. What could something like this do in this part of the world? And of course, when we think about shipping from a twin transformation perspective, while we've heard a lot about pharmaceutical today, there's a rise of a new consumer who wants digital nutrition and even digital medicines delivered via an app. Today, doctors are prescribing apps. No physical product needs to move, except maybe the iPhone or Samsung device. Now, before we go to bed at night, Lucian, my youngest, who has a little bit of anxiety, and the GP said we don't want to have him ended up on pills in the future, said, why don't you get into meditation with your son? And because we're a science fiction family, and I've introduced him in a very age-inappropriate fashion to Star Wars, which might be why he has anxiety, right, at age 5, he now does breath work every night with Yoda on the Headspace app. before we get to the really good human storytelling. This is digital nutrition, because today digital content online is brain chemistry wrapped in story. Digital content can trigger someone's brain chemistry so they don't need a pill to be shipped. Digital content is brain chemistry wrapped in story. The US Defense Force is now using similar technologies to fight PTSD through apps. Twin transformation. But this requires a digital growth mindset, away from an old school fixed mindset, and courtesy and cap nod to Carol Dweck for her work at Stanford on these concepts. We've just digitized them. But think about how you can move from, hey, I'm not good at this, it's digital twin transformation stuff, and instead go, what am I missing? Rather than thinking about, I give up, this climate change stuff is just too difficult, think about how you can use a different digital strategy. Thinking, it's good enough what we're doing. Go, is this really my best work? How do we use emerging technologies to truly set a new standard? We see this in the developing world, this digital growth mindset, which is also driving leapfrogging technology movements, where they no longer have to build the physical infrastructure, they skip generations like copper networks, etc. Right? Think of Myanmar and how quickly they have caught up in terms of smartphone penetration from these levels in 2006 to these levels where they're on par with the United States and China. This means no landlines needing to be put in. Does that save on carbon emissions? What does it also mean is that they skip a generation of payment technologies, the good plastic card, right? Because they use mobile payments straight away. This also now feeds into microgrids in places like Africa, where now 250,000 families have access to, via mobile payments on the M-Pesa mobile payment network, to solar energy in their homes, where previously the only source of light would be kerosene. I mean, this is exciting, right? And that leapfrogging technology thinking doesn't just happen in the developing world. Clients of ours like Philips also deploy this when they think about the circular economy, which is digitally empowered and enabled. As an example, they were like, hey, when we think about a new mobile ultrasound machine, we used to sell also the TV screen and the little thing that you wheeled around if you've ever been in a hospital. Now they're like, let's just build that, because everybody has got a screen in their back pocket. By next year, 25% of their revenues will come from the circular economy. They're leapfrogging and skipping generations of technology that's actually redundant today. So let's just recap of how technology offers a faster path to sustainability. Through process automation, carbon data transparency, circular products and services, data ecosystems and ventures, 45 to 70% reductions in carbon emissions possible according to our clients at BCG. This is a good news story, something that's often forgotten. But twin transformation, doing more with less, is a key to getting to our net zero economy of the future. But it takes a new mindset, and humans don't necessarily like change. Who struggles a little bit with change? When you hear about terms like AI or blockchain or non-fungible tokens, like who just wants to retire before you have to learn any of this new shit? Okay, there's a few of you, all right. Fantastic. Now, just to illustrate this concept of moving from left to right or from a linear economy to a circular economy, humans sometimes suck at change. The problem, of course, with change is that change doesn't really care whether I like it, we like it, our clients or partners like it or not. It's always going to happen without our permission. And when the rate of external technological change trumps the rate of internal agility, curiosity, or innovation, sooner or later we find ourselves in deep, deep trouble. Humans struggle a bit with change. Machines learn while we sleep, right? Let's have a look at this and compare and contrast for a moment. In 1967, the Swedish government decided we were going to shift from left lane driving to right lane driving, still to happen in certain parts of the world. It's the future of transport, all right? The big change management mantra from the Swedish government was just smile. We're all just new at this. Isn't it a wonderfully liberating change management mantra? Next time you roll out a new CRM system or a new way of sustainable logistics, just smile, we're all just new at this. Yeah? You can see there was every ambulance chasing lawyers, Disneyland. Let's compare and contrast that to a world of increasingly autonomous transport agents. And imagine for a moment sending your kids, your nieces, your nephews, maybe even your elderly grandparents across this intersection confidently on their way to the retirement village, to school, or whatever activities. Now, according to the World Economic Forum, over the next 10 years, we'll be able to save 1.1 million lives courtesy of autonomous vehicles. When I returned from my most recent overseas holiday unscathed from Liguria, Italy, I personally welcome the day when humans are no longer behind the wheels, at least in Liguria, Italy. When I shared this with one of our clients at Bharti Airtel in Mumbai, India, he said, "Anders, this is nothing new. This is what it looks like in Mumbai, India, every day of the week." Plus, we have semi-autonomous cows as well. Now, my mum always says, "Anders, the digital world feels digitally dehumanized." I would argue that when autonomous vehicles, whose stats are way better than human drivers, who don't drive while drinking or texting, we will be able to reduce the inhumane consequences of human error. To have smart grids where every vehicle actually communicates to one another and to the smart cities. Now, who here gets a little bit nervous when your iPhone or Samsung or Oppo battery starts running on low? Okay, I'm sorry for raising all these traumatic experiences for you here. Some of you had to check your phone to see will you make it through the day. Now, imagine being a Tesla owner or a co-financier with a bank a few hurricane seasons ago, and you're fleeing from Hurricane Irma, a climate change-induced event, in your Tesla down the highway with your family and your most beloved belongings. And you feel pretty good about being an early adopter of new technology as you enjoy that acceleration of the Tesla, until all of a sudden the Tesla battery starts running on low. What kind of passive-aggressive or aggressive-aggressive looks do you think you're getting from the passenger seat next to you? Okay? Until all of a sudden, across the dashboard comes a little message from Elon Musk saying, "Fret not, human. We've just safely and remotely upgraded your battery via the cloud so you can safely get out of harm's way." This is a true story. Your relationship with that cold piece of technology has now become anthropomorphized or humanized. It's now no longer a monologue between brand and consumer or a dialogue through social media between brand and consumer. It's brand, consumer, and the object in a trialogue. This predictive customer experience is something we all want today. And this happens in logistics and supply chain as well. We released a report together with Microsoft a few years ago on how AI is powering retail. And one of the case studies we looked at was the e-commerce site, The Iconic. Their AI-powered decision-making based on customer behavior is providing valuable replenishment insights. In fact, the retailer can now predict return rates with 80% accuracy. And if anyone in their shopping cart puts in the medium, the large, and the extra large of 3 different colors, I know you don't do this, but some other consumers do, a little friendly bot pops up and says, "Have you got some problem with sizing? Would you like to help us?" And as a result, they are able to reduce what gets ordered. Is this good for people, planet, as well as the Iconic's profit, who used to offer free shipping? Absolutely. I wrote a book a few years ago called Digilog, How to Win the Digital Minds and the Analog Hearts of Tomorrow's Customer. where I argue that the future is not about throwing away the analog baby with the digital bathwater, but embracing the best of these two worlds together. And in wrapping up, I just want to touch upon the rise of what's now known as the conscious consumer. A consumer who doesn't just accept stories or greenwashing through the supply chain, but they want a digitally verified supply chain. From farm to table, producer to consumer. They are conscious around a number of aspects. The conscious consumer today exists all around the world. In fact, 34% of current and former Audi, BMW, Mercedes, Tesla, or Volkswagen vehicle owners would gladly change their brand allegiance to another one based upon ESG credentials. 9 in 10 Aussie consumers are more likely to purchase ethical and sustainable products, 66% willing to pay a premium. And even investors care about these aspects as well. They are also incredibly data-driven. A few too many years ago, I ran the New York Marathon, and I did so spontaneously. Don't try this at home, with 16 hours preparation. Now, I always knew that the last 39.5 kilometers were really going to suck. But at least to my aid, I had a little digital piece of software and hardware in my back pocket. Something that could tell me from farm to table or from beginning to end how I was performing. Could tell me the couple of times I had to hide to go to the bathroom, to just hide from the world, when I sped up to go through more dangerous neighborhoods. Now, because of this technology, for every step I take, for every breath I make, I know Nike is watching me. Right? Now, if I take a run and there's no digital data to show for it, I feel like I have to retake the run. Is that just me? Might not be such a bad thing after all. Through heat mapping technologies, I could tell how I was comparing to my competition, and maybe if I ever did run a marathon ever again and I actually wanted to prepare for it, I could figure out via topographical maps how to actually prepare better for it and overtake my competition sooner than at the halfway mark. This is what's now expected by a new type of consumer who, through the entire supply chain, wants to know your story, your provenance, and have the digital data to show for and prove that your products actually are sustainable. To wrap up, let me give you one little example. Think about the humble iPhone, and think about the hundreds of devices it's now replaced. Like, think about this old school ad here from Radio Shack. We no longer need to buy the computer system, the Sony Walkman, the fax machine, right? We don't need to manufacture, produce them, or ship them because the services and functionalities are now digitized and they sit on the one device that rules them all. A device that's largely made up out of recycled parts. We take back the cobalt, the gold, and lithium to Apple when we, in a guilt-free and very conscious manner, upgrade to the next model. Guilt-free. These guys are showing the fact that we can have our planetary cake and our productivity gains while using less material resources all of the time. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to invite you all to start preparing for a new future. A future where AI now speaks human and we are all coders. A future where we combine the best of human ingenuity and human creativity and innovation with artificial intelligence and the best that machines can provide. A future that is sustainable, that is worthwhile, that's protecting our precious planet because we don't want to have to go to Mars. There is no planet B. Start preparing for that future today, ladies and gentlemen, because it is where you, your kids, and your grandkids are going to spend the rest of your lives. Thank you very much, and see you in that future. Thanks.
Thanks, Anders.